The sound hit him first, low moans mixed with laughter drifting down from the second floor of his own mansion. Damien Cross stood frozen in his marble foyer at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, his private jet having landed 3 hours earlier than scheduled. His wife Nia didn't know he was home. Neither did his cousin Travis, who'd been living in their guest wing for 6 months after losing his marketing job in Atlanta. Damien's hands trembled as he pulled off his Italian leather shoes, moving silently across the floor toward the grand staircase. Every instinct screamed at him to storm upstairs and confront what he already knew in his gut was happening. His heart hammered against his ribcage as another burst of familiar laughter, Nia's laughter, echoed through the vaulted ceilings. The woman he'd married 5 years ago in a ceremony that cost $500,000 was upstairs with his cousin, in his house, probably in his bed. Before you judge what happens next, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story of betrayal and revenge will shake you to your core. Damien had built everything from nothing, trusted the wrong people, and now his entire world was about to collapse. But what he didn't know yet was that the affair was just a beginning. Stick around until the end to see how a billionaire's silence became his deadliest weapon, and how the maid's warning saved him from losing everything he'd worked 20 years to build. Damien took the first step up the curved staircase, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. He'd built Cross Enterprises from nothing, turned a small tech startup into a billion-dollar empire that employed 15,000 people across North America. He'd given Nia everything she'd ever wanted. This $12 million mansion in the hills outside Los Angeles, unlimited credit cards, a walk-in closet the size of most people's apartments, and a Tesla for every day of the week. She'd been a graduate student when they met at a charity gala in downtown L.A., studying business administration at UCLA, beautiful and ambitious with dreams of running her own company someday. Damien had fallen hard, proposed after 6 months, and married her in a destination wedding in Bali that made the society pages. And Travis? Damien had welcomed his younger cousin with open arms when Travis called 6 months ago, voice breaking, saying he'd lost everything in a bad business deal. Family meant everything to Damien. His mother had raised him and Travis together after Travis's parents died in a car accident when they were teenagers. Damien had paid for Travis's college education at Howard University, helped him get his first marketing job in Atlanta, and stood as best man at Travis's wedding 5 years ago, a marriage that conveniently fell apart 2 months before Travis moved into the mansion with a sob story about his ex-wife taking everything. Now, as Damien climbed high on the staircase, each step feeling like he was walking toward his own execution, he could hear his wife's voice clearer, breathless and urgent, coming from the master bedroom. His bedroom. Their bedroom. The hallway stretched before him like a tunnel, dimly lit by designer sconces Nia had insisted cost $8,000 each because they were handcrafted in Italy by some artist whose name Damien couldn't even pronounce. Damien's mind raced through the last 6 months, searching desperately for signs he'd missed, clues he'd been too blind or too busy to see. Nia had been distant lately, always on her phone, texting and laughing at messages she never let him see. She'd started going to the gym twice a day, coming home with her hair perfect and her makeup fresh like she hadn't worked out at all. She'd taken 3 weekend trips to Napa Valley with her girlfriends in the last 2 months, or so she'd claimed, always coming back with expensive wine and stories about spa treatments. Travis had been overly helpful during those months, always volunteering to keep Nia company when Damien traveled for business, which was often, sometimes 3 weeks out of every month flying between L.A., New York, and Tokyo to manage his growing empire. She shouldn't be alone in this big house, cousin, Travis had said with that charming smile that ran in their family, the same smile that made people trust him instantly. I'll make sure she's okay. I'll keep her company, take her to dinner, make sure she doesn't get lonely. That's what family does, right? Damien had been grateful. He'd actually thanked Travis for being such a good cousin, for caring about Nia's well-being while Damien was thousands of miles away closing deals and building the future he thought they all wanted. The irony burned in his chest like acid now, each breath feeling like he was inhaling broken glass. He reached the bedroom door. Slightly ajar, warm light from the bedside lamp spilling into the hallway in a golden rectangle. He could see shadows moving against the far wall, 2 bodies intertwined. hear the rustle of silk sheets, those ridiculously expensive Egyptian cotton sheets he'd had imported from a boutique supplier in Milan, 1,500 thread count, because Nia said regular sheets irritated her skin. Everything in this house had been chosen for Nia, customized to her taste, purchased with his money to make her happy. The imported marble in the foyer from Carrara, the kitchen appliances from Germany that cost more than most people's cars, the infinity pool in the backyard that had required 6 months of construction and a $500,000 budget. All of it for her. All of it to build the perfect life. And this was how she repaid him, by sleeping with his cousin under the roof Damien provided, in the bed where they'd promised to love each other forever. Damien's hand touched the ornate brass door handle, cool against his palm, and he felt the rage building to a breaking point. That's when he felt it, a small, firm hand gripping his forearm with surprising strength. Damien spun around, ready to lash out at whoever dared to stop him, and found Rosa standing there in her simple gray housekeeping uniform. Rosa had worked for him for 8 years, since before he'd even met Nia, a quiet woman in her 50s who kept the mansion spotless and never caused any trouble. She was barely 5 feet tall, her black hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a tight bun, but her grip on his arm was like iron. She pressed a weathered finger to her lips, her dark eyes wide with an urgency that cut through Damien's rage like a knife. She shook her head violently, then tugged him away from the door with a force that seemed impossible for her small frame. Damien wanted to shake her off, to burst through that door and drag Travis out by his throat, to scream at Nia until his voice gave out, but something in Rosa's expression stopped him cold. There was fear there, yes, but also something else, knowledge, secrets, information that she desperately needed to share. She pulled him down the hallway, past the home theater with its 12 leather recliners, past the library with its floor-to-ceiling shelves of books Nia had never read, all the way to the back staircase that the staff used, the one that led down to the industrial-sized kitchen. Only when they were safely downstairs, with a heavy soundproof door closed firmly behind them and the hum of the refrigerators filling the silence, did Rosa finally release his arm and speak in a trembling whisper. Can you believe a billionaire's own family would betray him like this? Comment below what you would do in Damien's position. The maid knows something that could change everything, something worse than just an affair. Don't click away, because next chapter reveals a shocking plan that could cost Damien his entire empire, or give him the ultimate revenge. You won't want to miss what Rosa shows him next. Mr. Cross, Rosa whispered, her voice shaking as tears streamed down her weathered face. Please don't talk. Please, sir. If you confront them now, you'll lose everything. Her accent was thick with emotion, each word heavy with urgency. Damien stared at her, his chest still heaving from the rage coursing through his veins, every muscle in his body coiled tight like a spring ready to snap. What are you talking about? He hissed, keeping his voice low through sheer force of will, even though everything in him wanted to scream. Rosa glanced nervously at the ceiling, as if she could see through the floors to where his wife and cousin were still tangled together in his bed. Then she pulled out her phone with trembling hands, her fingers fumbling with the screen for a moment before she found what she was looking for. She scrolled through something, her face illuminated by the blue glow, then held the phone up to Damien with an expression that looked like she was handing him a loaded gun. You need to see this first, she said. You need to know what they've really been doing. Damien took the phone, squinting at the screen, and his blood ran cold as ice water flooded his veins. It was a video, date stamped from 3 weeks ago, crystal clear footage from the security camera in his home office, the one room in the entire mansion he'd thought was completely private, his sanctuary where he conducted his most sensitive business. In the video, Travis sat casually at Damien's mahogany desk like he owned the place, going through files on Damien's personal computer with the confidence of someone who'd done it many times before. But that wasn't the worst part. Nia stood behind Travis, leaning over his shoulder, her long braids falling forward as she pointed at the screen with one manicured finger and laughed at something Travis said. They weren't just looking at random files or browsing the internet. They were deep in Damien's financial documents, business contracts, confidential merger plans for Cross Enterprises' biggest deal of the year, a $300 million acquisition of a smaller tech company that would expand Damien's empire into artificial intelligence and machine learning. Documents that were protected by non-disclosure agreements, that could tank the deal if they leaked to competitors, that represented 2 years of negotiations and planning. Travis scrolled through spreadsheets showing Cross Enterprises' complete financial structure, offshore accounts, investment portfolios, everything. And Nia was helping him, reading things aloud, taking photos with her own phone. "This is the one," Nia said in the video, her voice clear as a bell. "This is what Gregory needs to see. The acquisition timeline and the client list. Once TechVision knows when Damien's planning to close the Sterling Tech deal, they can undercut him and steal it right out from under him." Rosa swiped to the next video, and then the next, a cascade of evidence that made Damien's stomach turn. There were dozens of clips spanning 3 months, all showing the same pattern. Travis and Nia sneaking into his office whenever Damien was traveling, rifling through his files, photographing documents, even recording phone calls Damien had with his lawyers and business partners. In one video from 6 weeks ago, Travis sat in Damien's chair with his feet up on the desk, talking on his phone while Nia lounged on the leather sofa. "Yeah, I'm telling you, this is going to work," Travis said to whoever was on the other end. "Damien's so busy trying to be a good husband and a good cousin that he doesn't see what's right in front of him. By the time he figures it out, we'll have everything we need." Nia laughed in the background, painting her nails with expensive polish from a collection she kept in Damien's bathroom. "He deserves this," she said, not even looking up. "He's never home anyway. Always flying off to some meeting, some deal, some conference. What kind of husband does that? I didn't sign up to be married to a ghost." Travis grinned at her. "Well, after the divorce, you'll get half of everything. And with what I'm getting from TechVision for this information, we'll both be set for life." "I have more," Rosa whispered, pulling Damien back to the present moment in the kitchen where he stood frozen, his mind reeling from what he'd just witnessed. 3 months of videos, Mr. Cross. I've been saving them all on this phone and on a backup drive I keep in my apartment. They've been planning this for a long time. They are not just... She paused, unable to say the word affair, as if speaking it would make it more real. "They are stealing from you. Corporate espionage. I looked it up. It's a federal crime." She swiped to another video, this one from just last week. It showed Travis meeting with someone in a coffee shop downtown. Rosa must have followed him and recorded it from a distance. The man Travis was meeting with was immediately recognizable to Damien. Gregory Washington, CEO of TechVision Industries, Cross Enterprises' biggest competitor, and a man who'd been trying to destroy Damien's business for 5 years. They were exchanging a manila envelope, shaking hands, laughing like old friends. Mr. Travis had been meeting with him every week. Rosa continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes Mrs. Cross goes too. I followed them twice. They meet at different places, restaurants, hotels, coffee shops, always somewhere public where they think nobody's watching. But I was watching, Mr. Cross. I've been watching for 2 months now, since I first saw them in your office on the security feed." Damien's hand shook as he handed the phone back to Rosa, his mind racing through the implications of everything he'd just learned. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just his wife sleeping with his cousin. That would have been devastating enough, a betrayal that would have shattered his heart into a million pieces. This was worse. This was calculated, premeditated theft of trade secrets that could destroy Cross Enterprises completely. If TechVision got their hands on the Sterling Tech acquisition plans, they could outbid Damien and steal the deal, which would cost him not just the $300 million in the acquisition itself, but a projected $2 billion in revenue over the next 5 years. And if they had access to his client list and financial structure, they could poach his biggest accounts, undercut his prices, systematically dismantle everything he built. The divorce would take half of what remained. California was a community property state, which meant Neil would walk away with half of his assets, half of his company, half of his life's work. Travis would disappear with whatever TechVision was paying him, probably millions for this level of corporate intelligence. And Damien would be left with nothing but ruins and betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Damien asked, his voice hoarse. Rosa's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I was scared," Mr. Cross. Mr. Travis. He threatened me last month. He found me in the hallway outside your office one night and told me if I ever said anything to you about what I saw, he'd make sure I got deported back to Guatemala. What would you do if your own family plotted to destroy everything you built? Drop a comment and let us know. Make sure you're subscribed because next chapter is where Damien starts planning his revenge. And trust me, what he comes up with will blow your mind. The billionaire is about to show them what happens when you betray the wrong man. Damien didn't sleep that night. He sat in the kitchen until 3 in the morning, watching every single video Rosa had collected, taking notes on his phone, building a timeline of the betrayal that had been unfolding under his own roof for months. Rosa made him coffee and sat with him in silence, occasionally pointing out details he might have missed, a document Travis photographed, a phone call Nia recorded, a meeting date that corresponded with one of Damien's business trips. By the time the sun started rising over the Los Angeles hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink visible through the kitchen windows, Damien had seen enough evidence to send both Travis and Nia to federal prison for corporate espionage and to bury them in civil lawsuits that would leave them penniless for the rest of their lives. But prison wasn't enough. Money wasn't enough. Damien wanted something more. He wanted them to feel the same betrayal, the same humiliation, the same soul-crushing devastation that was currently eating him alive from the inside out. He wanted revenge that would hurt worse than any jail cell. And as the coffee grew cold in his cup and Rosa dozed off in the chair beside him, exhaustion finally claiming her after hours of reliving the surveillance footage, Damien began to formulate a plan that would require every ounce of self-control he possessed. He would have to pretend nothing was wrong. He would have to smile at his wife across the breakfast table, shake his cousin's hand, play the role of the oblivious husband and trusting family member while he systematically dismantled their scheme from the inside. The plan came together in his mind like the business strategies he'd built his empire on, careful, methodical, ruthlessly efficient. First, he needed to protect his assets and his company before Nia could file for divorce. That meant meeting with his lawyers immediately to explore every legal option for shielding cross-enterprises from California's community property laws. He'd need to document everything: the affair, the corporate espionage, Nia's involvement in stealing trade secrets. In California, infidelity alone wasn't enough to affect a divorce settlement, but criminal activity was a different story entirely. If he could prove Nia had participated in theft of intellectual property and conspiracy to damage his business, he might be able to invalidate their prenuptial agreement on ground of fraud and keep her from getting a single dollar of his fortune. Second, he needed to feed false information to Travis and Nia, let them think they were still successfully stealing his secrets while actually giving them useless or misleading data that would sabotage TechVision's attempt to compete with him. Third, and most importantly, he needed to catch them all in the act: Travis, Nia, and Gregory Washington from TechVision, with evidence so overwhelming that federal prosecutors would have no choice but to bring charges. Rosa had given him the surveillance footage, which was damning, but he needed more. He needed recorded conversations, financial transactions, proof of payment from TechVision to Travis. Damien stood up from the kitchen table, his decision made, and gently shook Rosa awake. She startled, her eyes flying open with fear until she remembered where she was and who she was with. "Mr. Cross," she said, sitting up straight and smoothing down her uniform. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to fall asleep. What time is it?" Damien glanced at his Rolex. 5:30 in the morning. "Rosa, I need you to keep doing exactly what you've been doing," he said quietly. "Keep watching them. Keep recording everything, but don't let them know you're suspicious. Act completely normal. Can you do that?" Rosa nodded immediately, her face set with determination. "Yes, sir. I can do that." Damien pulled out his wallet and handed her $5,000 in cash, money he always kept on hand for emergencies. Rosa's eyes went wide. "This is for everything you've done and everything you're going to do," Damien said. "And there's more where that came from. When this is over, I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. New immigration lawyer, green card, everything. Travis's threats mean nothing. You understand?" Rosa's hand shook as she took the money, tears spilling down her cheeks again. Thank you, Mr. Cross. Thank you so much. Damien squeezed her shoulder gently. Thank you, Rosa. You saved my life last night. If I confronted them without knowing the full truth, I would have lost everything. He left Rosa in the kitchen and made his way to the guest house behind the pool, a small but luxurious space he'd built for visiting business associates and family members. It had its own bedroom, bathroom, and living area, completely separate from the main house. Damien showered and changed into fresh clothes from a wardrobe he kept there, then sat on the bed and forced himself to think clearly through the exhaustion and emotional devastation. At 7 o'clock, he called his head of security, a former FBI agent named Jerome Matthews who'd been handling Cross Enterprises corporate security for 3 years. Jerome, I need you at my house in 1 hour, Damien said without preamble. Don't come to the main house. Come to the guest house. And bring equipment for a counterintelligence operation. I'll explain everything when you get here. Jerome, to his credit, didn't ask questions. I'll be there, boss. Next, Damien called his personal attorney, Patricia Chen, a shark in the courtroom who'd handled the legal side of every major deal Cross Enterprises had ever made. Patricia answered on the second ring despite the early hour, her voice sharp and alert. Damien? What's wrong? Even she could hear the tension in his voice. I need you at my house by 9 this morning, Damien said. And I need you to bring David. David Morrison was Patricia's partner, a specialist in family law and high-net-worth divorces. Don't tell anyone where you're going or why. This is confidential. Extremely confidential. There was a pause. Damien, you're scaring me. What happened? Damien closed his eyes. My wife is having an affair with my cousin, and they are both selling my company's secrets to Tech Vision Industries. I have proof. I need to know my legal options before I make my next move. Patricia sucked in a sharp breath, and Damien could hear her moving around, probably already getting dressed and gathering files. Oh my God! Damien, I'm so sorry. We'll be there. 9 o'clock sharp. Guest house. She'd been to enough meetings at the mansion to know the layout. Yes, come through the side gate. I don't want them to see you. After he hung up, Damien sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the wall, letting himself feel the full weight of the betrayal for just a few minutes before he had to put on his mask. His wife, the woman he'd loved, the woman he'd given everything to, the woman he'd imagined growing old with, had looked at him and seen nothing but a bank account to drain. And Travis, his cousin, the boy he'd grown up with and protected like a brother, had repaid his kindness with the worst kind of treachery. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on his chest that made it hard to breathe. But Damien Cross hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by letting his emotions control him. He'd built it by being smarter, more strategic, and more ruthless than everyone else. And now he was going to use every skill he'd ever learned to destroy the people who'd tried to destroy him. By 8:30, Jerome had arrived with 2 cases of surveillance equipment. By 9:15, Patricia and David were sitting in the guest house living room, reviewing the videos Rosa had collected, their faces growing darker with each clip. Are you Team Damien, or do you think he should just walk away? Comment below and let's discuss. Hit that like button if you're ready to see this billionaire take his power back. Next chapter is where everything starts falling into place. The trap is set, and Nia and Travis have no idea what's coming for them. Don't go anywhere. Patricia Chen sat back in the leather armchair, her expression a mixture of professional calculation and personal fury as she finished watching the last video on Rosa's phone. She was a woman in her early 50s, sharp-featured with silver streaks in her short natural hair, wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. David Morrison, younger by a decade with warm brown skin and kind eyes that had seen countless ugly divorces, shook his head slowly as he closed his notepad filled with observations. This is one of the worst cases I've ever seen, David said quietly, his voice heavy with disgust. Not just the affair, but the systematic theft, the planning, the conspiracy with a competitor. Damien, I want you to know that what they are doing goes far beyond typical marital infidelity. This is organized crime. This is betrayal on a scale that most people can't even comprehend. Patricia leaned forward, her elbows on her knees, fixing Damien with the intense stare that had made opposing counsel crumble in courtrooms across the country. Here's what we're looking at legally. The corporate espionage alone carries federal penalties of up to 15 years in prison and fines up to $5 million. If we can prove that TechVision knowingly purchased stolen trade secrets, Gregory Washington goes down too. On the divorce side, California is a community property state, which normally means Nia would be entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. But, and this is a big but, we can argue fraud in the inducement of marriage and criminal conduct that financially harmed the community estate. What does that mean in plain English? Damien asked, even though part of him already knew. He needed to hear it spelled out, needed to understand exactly what weapons he had in his arsenal. Patricia smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was a smile of a predator who'd just spotted wounded prey. It means we can argue that Nia married you under false pretenses, that she never intended to honor her vows, and that her criminal activity, stealing your trade secrets and conspiring to damage your business, actually damaged the marital estate she's now trying to claim half of. If we can prove all of that, and we can with these videos, we can potentially get the prenuptial agreement in force in full, which as I recall leaves her with exactly $2 million and nothing else. No stake in Cross Enterprises, no claim to your personal assets, just a flat $2 million you agreed to give her if the marriage ended. Damien remembered that prenup negotiation 5 years ago. Nia had cried, said it wasn't romantic to plan for divorce before they even got married, but her lawyer father had insisted she sign something. Damien had offered her $2 million as a show of good faith, thinking it was generous, never imagining he'd actually need to enforce it. Now that $2 million felt like $2 million more than she deserved. David picked up where Patricia left off, flipping through his notes with practiced efficiency. Beyond the prenup, we're looking at potential criminal charges against both Nia and Travis. Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, potentially even RICO charges if we can prove this was an organized criminal enterprise. I'm recommending we bring in the FBI immediately. He paused, studying Damien's face carefully. But I'm sensing you don't want to do that yet. You want something else first. Damien nodded slowly. David was perceptive. That's why he was one of the best divorce attorneys in Los Angeles. I want them to think they're winning, Damien said, his voice cold and controlled despite the rage still simmering beneath the surface. I want them to believe they've successfully stolen everything they need, that the divorce is going to go their way, that Travis is going to get his payday from TechVision. And then I want to pull the rug out from under all of them at once. Jerome Matthews, who'd been standing quietly by the window, finally spoke up. The former FBI agent was a tall man in his 40s, built like he still hit the gym every day, with close-cropped hair going gray at the temples. You want to run a counterintelligence operation. Feed them false information. Let them pass it to TechVision. Catch everyone in the act with fresh evidence we create ourselves. Exactly, Damien said, feeling the first spark of satisfaction he'd felt since discovering the affair. This was his element. Strategy, planning, outmaneuvering opponents. He'd done it in business for 20 years. Now he'd do it in his personal life, and he'd do it so thoroughly that Nia and Travis would never see it coming. Jerome, I need you to set up additional surveillance in the house. Cameras they won't find. Audio recording in my office. Everything. I want to document every single thing they do from this point forward. Rosa has been using the existing security system, but I want more. I want coverage they can't avoid. Jerome nodded, already making notes on his tablet. I can have it installed tomorrow while they're out. Small cameras, professional-grade audio equipment, the works. They'll never know it's there. Patricia tapped her pen against her notepad. And the false information? What exactly are you planning to feed them? Damien had been thinking about this all morning, and the plan was beautifully simple. There's a deal I've been negotiating with a European tech consortium. Real deal, legitimate, but it's still in very early stages. I'm going to create fake documents that make it look like it's further along than it is, with inflated value projections and a closing timeline that completely fabricated. I'll leave those documents on my computer where Travis can find them. He'll photograph them, pass them to Tech Vision, and Gregory Washington will waste millions of dollars trying to interfere with a deal that doesn't actually exist in the form I'm showing them. That's brilliant, David said, genuine admiration in his voice. You're not just catching them in the act of stealing information. You're proving they acted on that information, which demonstrates intent and damages. That makes the criminal case airtight. Patricia was already thinking 3 steps ahead, which was why Damien paid her a fortune in retainer fees. What about the divorce? When are you planning to file? Damien's jaw tightened. I'm not. Nia's going to file. She thinks she's going to surprise me, hit me with papers while I'm vulnerable and off balance, probably right after she and Travis think they've gotten everything they need to Tech Vision. But we're going to be ready. The moment she files, we counter with our own filing that includes all the evidence of a criminal activity, and we get a restraining order freezing all marital assets pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. He looked at each of them in turn. Patricia, David, Jerome. I want to be clear about something. I'm not doing this just for revenge, although I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. I'm doing this because what they've done is wrong, and if I don't stop them, they'll do it to someone else. Travis will find another successful cousin or friend to leech off of. Nia will find another wealthy man to marry and betray. And Gregory Washington will keep stealing from competitors because he's too incompetent to build his own success legitimately. Jerome moved away from the window and sat down across from Damien, his expression serious. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Can you actually pull this off? Can you go back into that house, look your wife in the eye, have dinner with your cousin, and pretend like everything is normal? Because if you slip up even once, if they sense something is wrong, they'll scatter like roaches when the lights come on. Travis will disappear. Nia will file for divorce immediately and try to grab whatever she can before we can stop her, and we'll lose our chance to catch them altogether. Damien thought about the question carefully. Could he do it? Could he smile at Nia over breakfast, kiss her goodbye, make small talk with Travis about football games and business news, all while knowing what they'd been doing in his bed and his office? Every instinct screamed at him to confront them, to unleash the rage that had been building since last night, to watch them squirm and beg and try to explain the inexplicable. But Damien hadn't become a billionaire by giving in to his instincts. He'd become a billionaire by being patient, by playing the long game, by sacrificing short-term satisfaction for long-term victory. I can do it, he said finally, and he meant it. I've sat across negotiating tables from people who were trying to bankrupt me and smiled while I destroyed their companies. I've shaken hands with competitors who wanted me dead and walked away with their best clients. This isn't different. It's just more personal. Can Damien really pull this off without breaking? What would you do if you had to pretend everything was fine while your world was falling apart? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Smash that subscribe button because next chapter is where the trap snaps shut and everything comes crashing down. You absolutely cannot miss what happens when Nia and Travis realize they've been played. 3 weeks passed, and Damien performed the role of his life. Every morning he woke up next to Nia, kissed her forehead, told her he loved her, and watched her smile, that beautiful lying smile that used to make his heart skip but now made his stomach turn. Every evening he came home to find Travis in the living room, feet up on the coffee table, drinking Damien's expensive bourbon, and Damien would clasp his cousin's hand, ask about his day, laugh at his jokes like they were still family. It was torture of the highest order, a special kind of hell that burned hotter because Damien had to keep the flames hidden behind a mask of normalcy. But Jerome's new surveillance system captured everything, every stolen moment between Nia and Travis when they thought Damien was in his home gym, every whispered phone call Travis made to Gregory Washington, every time Nia photographed documents from Damien's strategically unlocked computer. The fake European deal documents had worked perfectly. Damien had watched on the surveillance feed as Travis nearly jumped out of his chair when he found the files, immediately calling Nia into the office to look at what he'd discovered. This is it, Travis had said, his voice giddy with greed. $800 million deal, closing in 6 weeks. If we get this to Gregory now, Tech Vision can beat Damien to the punch. They'd spent 2 hours photographing every page of the fabricated documents, not realizing that Jerome's cameras were capturing them from 3 different angles in crystal clear 4K resolution. The hardest part wasn't pretending everything was normal. The hardest part was watching Nia lie to his face with such ease, such practice skill, that Damien wondered if she'd ever told him the truth about anything. One night, she curled up next to him in bed, running her fingers through his hair the way she used to when they first got married. "I miss you," she'd whispered. "You're always so busy with work. I feel like I never see you anymore." Damien had forced himself to pull her closer, to stroke her back, to murmur apologies and promises about taking a vacation soon, all while knowing that she'd been with Travis that very afternoon while Damien was supposedly in a meeting downtown. He'd actually been in the guest house with Jerome and Patricia, reviewing the latest surveillance footage. The footage from that afternoon had shown Nia and Travis in the master bedroom again, and afterward, Nia had showered, fixed her makeup, changed her clothes, and transformed back into the loving wife, erasing all evidence of a betrayal like it had never happened. The casual cruelty of it, the calculated deception, hurt worse than the physical affair itself. Damien could have understood passion, a moment of weakness, even a genuine emotional connection that had grown despite everyone's best intentions. But this was cold, mercenary, sociopathic in its planning and execution. Travis was somehow worse because he played the role of concerned family with such enthusiasm. He'd started joining Damien for morning workouts in the home gym, spotting him on the bench press, talking about getting back on his feet and finding a new job soon. "I really appreciate everything you've done for me, cousin," Travis had said one morning, sweat dripping down his face as they finished a brutal set of deadlifts. "Taking me in when I had nowhere else to go, giving me time to figure things out. You're a better man than me. I don't know if I'd have done the same." Damien had smiled and clapped Travis on the shoulder, fighting the urge to wrap his hands around his cousin's throat right there in the gym. "That's what family does," he'd replied, echoing the exact words Travis had used months ago when he'd offered to keep Nia company. The irony was apparently lost on Travis, who'd grinned and suggested they grab breakfast together. They'd eaten omelets that Rosa prepared, the same Rosa who was now Damien's co-conspirator, and Travis had talked about a consulting opportunity that was coming through, a big payday that would let him get his own place soon. Damien had congratulated him warmly, knowing full well that the consulting opportunity was a payment from TechVision for the stolen trade secrets, payment that would never actually materialize because Gregory Washington was about to have much bigger problems than paying off his corporate spy. The plan reached its culmination on a Friday evening in late November. Patricia had everything ready, federal prosecutors lined up, FBI agents briefed, civil lawsuits drafted and ready to file. TechVision had taken the bait completely, spending millions to accelerate their own version of the fabricated European deal, poaching Damien's contacts, making moves in the market that would have destroyed cross-enterprises if the deal had been real. But it wasn't real, and every action TechVision took based on the stolen false documents was documented proof of their willingness to use illegally obtained corporate intelligence. Gregory Washington had even sent Travis a bonus payment of $250,000 a previous week, wired to an offshore account that the FBI was now tracking. It was all coming together beautifully, every piece falling into place exactly as Damien had planned. That Friday, Damien came home early again, intentionally this time, at 7 o'clock instead of his usual 9 or 10. He'd told Nia he'd be late, told her not to wait up, knowing she'd interpret that as an opportunity. And she had. The house was quiet when Damien entered through the front door, but he could hear music playing softly upstairs, could see lights on in the master bedroom. This time, he didn't need Rosa to stop him. This time, he walked up those stairs with purpose, with Patricia and David waiting in cars outside the gate, with Jerome and 2 FBI agents in an unmarked van monitoring everything through the surveillance system. Damien reached the bedroom door and pushed it open without hesitation. Nia and Travis sprang apart with gratifying speed, scrambling to cover themselves with the silk sheets, their faces cycling through shock, fear, and then something like defiance. "Damien!" Nia gasped, clutching the sheet to her chest. "You're home early. I can explain. This isn't. It's not what it looks like." Damien laughed, and the sound was cold enough to freeze water. It's not what it looks like. Really, Nia? That's the best you can do. He pulled out his phone and held it up, showing him the surveillance feed from 3 weeks ago. Them in his office, going through his files, photographing documents. How about this? Is this what it looks like? Travis had gone pale, his characteristic charm evaporating as he realized what was happening. Damien, man, listen, we can talk about this. But Damien cut him off with a gesture. No, Travis, we're done talking. We've been done talking since the moment you decided to betray me. Since the moment you both decided that stealing from me and destroying my company was worth whatever TechVision was paying you. He scrolled through his phone, showing them video after video, their faces growing more ashen with each clip. I know everything. I've known for 3 weeks. Every file you stole, every secret you sold, every lie you told. I have it all documented. The FBI is outside right now, waiting for my signal. Nia started crying, mascara running down her face, but Damien felt nothing. Please, she sobbed. Please, Damien, I'm sorry. We made a mistake. We can fix this. Damien shook his head. The only mistake was mine, trusting you, loving you, believing family meant something. Do you think they deserve what's coming? Common justice if you're Team Damien. Hit that like button and subscribe, because next chapter is the final chapter where Damien gets everything he deserves, and they get exactly what they deserve. The ending will leave you speechless. I promise you that. Don't click away now. The next hour unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance that Damien had been rehearsing in his mind for 3 weeks. He made the call, and within 5 minutes, FBI agents swept into the mansion with Patricia and David following close behind. Special Agent Lisa Rodriguez, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who had been briefed on every detail of the case, read Nia and Travis their rights while they sat on the bed wrapped in sheets, their earlier defiance crumbling into panic and desperate pleas. Damien, please, we're family, Travis begged, his voice cracking as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. We grew up together. Your mom raised me. You can't do this to family. Damien stepped closer, his voice low and lethal. You're right, Travis. I can't do this to family. But you're not family anymore. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't betray. Family doesn't sleep with their cousin's wife and then sit at his table and smile like nothing's wrong. Nia was sobbing uncontrollably now, her carefully maintained beauty falling apart under the weight of her crimes. I loved you, she gasped between sobs. I really did love you, Damien. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. Damien felt nothing as he looked at her. No, you loved my money. You loved what I could give you. But you never loved me, because if you had, you couldn't have done this. Love doesn't conspire. Love doesn't destroy. Agent Rodriguez and her team escorted both of them out in handcuffs, reading off the charges as they walked. Conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, wire fraud. The list went on, each charge carrying years of potential prison time. The arrest didn't stop with Nia and Travis. Within 24 hours, federal agents had also picked up Gregory Washington at TechVision headquarters, executing search warrants that uncovered years of corporate espionage against multiple competitors, not just cross-enterprises. The case that Damien had built became the cornerstone of a much larger investigation into TechVision's business practices. Gregory's offshore accounts were frozen, his assets seized, and his company's stock price plummeted when news of the criminal charges hit the media. It turned out that stealing trade secrets had been TechVision's primary business strategy for years. They'd just never been caught before because their previous victims hadn't had Damien's resources or his determination to see justice done. The false European deal documents that Damien had created became Exhibit A in the prosecution's case, proving beyond any doubt that TechVision had knowingly purchased and acted upon stolen corporate intelligence. Gregory Washington tried to claim ignorance, tried to say he thought the information came from legitimate market research, but the $250,000 payment to Travis's offshore account told a different story. In the end, Gregory took a plea deal, 15 years in federal prison and complete dissolution of TechVision Industries. Everything the company owned was liquidated to pay fines and restitution to the companies they'd victimized over the years. Travis folded first, just 2 weeks after his arrest. Facing 30 years in prison if convicted on all charges, he agreed to testify against both Nia and Gregory in exchange for a reduced sentence of 8 years. Damien sat in the prosecutor's office and watched his cousin break down on video deposition, confessing to everything. How the affair had started 4 months into Travis moving into the mansion, how Nia had been the one to initially suggest stealing Damien's business secrets, how they contacted Gregory Washington together with their proposal. She said Damien deserved it. Travis said on the video, his voice hollow. She said he cared more about his business than about her, that he was never home, that the money should be his anyway. I convinced myself she was right. I convinced myself that Damien had so much that taking some of it wouldn't really hurt him. Patricia, sitting beside Damien as they watched the deposition, made a disgusted sound. They always justify it to themselves, she said quietly. Every cheater, every thief, every betrayer, they all have a story about why their victim deserved it. Damien said nothing, just watched as a cousin he'd loved like a brother destroyed whatever remained of their relationship with his self-serving testimony. When the deposition ended, Damien stood up and walked out without a word. He'd gotten what he needed. Travis's confession would make the criminal case against Nia airtight. Nia fought harder, hiring expensive lawyers with money from her father, insisting she'd been coerced by Travis, claiming she was a victim of manipulation and abuse. But the surveillance footage told a different story. Video of Nia laughing as she photographed Damien's documents. Audio of her calling Damien a fool who deserved to be taken advantage of. Records of a meeting with Gregory Washington without Travis present. All of it painted a picture of a woman who'd been an enthusiastic and willing participant in a conspiracy from beginning. The divorce proceedings ran parallel to the criminal case, and they were brutal. David Morrison shredded Nia's claims to half of Damien's assets, presenting evidence of fraud in the inducement of marriage and criminal conduct that had damaged the marital estate. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen too many cases of greed and betrayal, ruled in Damien's favor on every single point. The prenuptial agreement was enforced in full, but with a twist. Because Nia's criminal activity had been aimed specifically at damaging Damien's business and stealing marital assets, the judge ruled that she forfeited even the $2 million a prenup had guaranteed her. Nia would leave the marriage with exactly nothing, and she'd do it from a prison cell. In the end, she took a plea deal to 12 years in federal prison, all assets seized, and a permanent bar from ever working in any corporate or financial capacity again. The day the divorce was finalized and Nia's plea deal was signed, Damien sat in Patricia's office and felt the weight that had been crushing his chest for months finally begin to lift. "It's over," Patricia said, pouring him a glass of expensive scotch in celebration. "You won, Damien, completely and totally. Your business is safe, your assets are protected, and the people who betrayed you are going to prison for a very long time." Damien took the glass but didn't drink immediately. "I don't feel like I won," he admitted. "I feel like I survived. There's a difference." Patricia nodded, her expression understanding. "That's fair. You lost people you loved, even if they didn't deserve your love. That kind of betrayal leaves scars. But you protected yourself and your company, and you made sure they couldn't do this to anyone else. That counts for something." Damien finally took a sip of the scotch, letting the burn ground him. "Rosa," he said suddenly, "we need to make sure Rosa's taken care of. She saved me. If she hadn't stopped me that night, if she hadn't shown me the truth, I would have confronted them without evidence and lost everything." Patricia smiled. "Already done. I've got the best immigration attorney in California working on her green card application. She'll be a permanent resident within 6 months, guaranteed. And the bonus you authorized, $500,000, has already been deposited in an account we set up for her." 6 months later, Damien stood in the same mansion where his life had fallen apart, but everything felt different now. The rooms that had been filled with lies and betrayal had been cleansed, redecorated, transformed into spaces that felt like home again instead of crime scenes. Rosa, now officially a permanent resident and promoted to house manager with a 6-figure salary, had helped him choose new furniture, Knew art, knew everything. They'd even replaced the bed. Damien had taken particular satisfaction in having the old one hauled away and destroyed. Cross Enterprises had thrived in the aftermath of the scandal. The publicity around the case, while initially concerning, had actually boosted Damien's reputation as a CEO who wouldn't tolerate corporate espionage and who had the intelligence and resources to catch even the most sophisticated thieves. 3 major new clients had signed with Cross Enterprises specifically because they were impressed with how Damien had handled the situation. The real sterling tech deal, not the fabricated version he'd used as bait, had closed successfully, expanding his company into artificial intelligence exactly as planned. Damien's net worth had actually increased by $400 million in the 6 months since the arrests, and Cross Enterprises was being courted by venture capital firms looking to invest in his next big expansion. Professionally, he'd never been stronger. Personally, he was still healing, but he was healing. He'd started therapy, working through the betrayal and learning to trust again, learning to recognize red flags he'd missed with Nia. The doorbell rang one evening in late May, and Rosa answered it with a smile before calling up to Damien in his office. "Mr. Cross, you have a visitor." Damien came downstairs to find his mother standing in the foyer, her face lined with age but her eyes still sharp and loving. They'd spoken on the phone throughout the ordeal, but this was her first visit since everything had happened. "Mom," Damien said, pulling her into a hug, "you didn't tell me you were coming." She hugged him back fiercely, then pulled away to look at his face, studying him the way only mothers can. "I wanted to see with my own eyes that you were okay. Really okay, not just pretending for my benefit." Damien led her to the living room, and they sat together while Rosa brought tea. "I'm getting there," Damien admitted. "Some days are harder than others. I still can't believe Travis did what he did. I keep thinking about when we were kids, all the times I protected him, helped him, and wondering if I ever really knew him at all." His mother sighed, her own pain evident. "I raised that boy alongside you, and I'm still trying to understand how he could betray you like that. But, Damien, you need to know something. What Travis did, what Nia did, that's on them, not you. You did nothing wrong. You were loyal and loving and generous, and they took advantage of that. But don't let their betrayal make you hard. Don't let it steal your ability to trust and love again." Damien squeezed her hand. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am." She smiled, and it was warm and proud. "I know you are, baby, and you're going to be fine. You're stronger than you think." After his mother left that evening, Damien stood on his balcony overlooking Los Angeles, the city lights spreading out below him like a carpet of stars. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Final sentencing hearing tomorrow. Nia gets 12 years. Travis gets 8. Gregory gets 15. Justice served." Damien typed back a simple thank you for everything and pocketed his phone. He thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, the man who'd come home early and heard sounds that shattered his world, the man who'd almost confronted his cheating wife and lost everything in the process. That man had been destroyed by betrayal, but from the ashes, someone stronger had emerged. Someone who understood that love without wisdom was dangerous, that trust had to be earned, that family was about actions and not just blood. Damien had lost a wife and a cousin, but he gained something more valuable, the knowledge of his own strength, the certainty that he could survive anything, and the understanding that justice, when pursued with intelligence and patience, would always prevail over deception. As he stood there in the warm California night, Damien Cross felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Hope for the future. Hope for healing. Hope that somewhere out there was someone who would love him for who he was and not what he had, someone who would never betray the trust he gave them. And when that person came into his life, he'd be ready, stronger and wiser than before, with scars that had healed into armor and lessons learned through the hardest teacher of all, experience. The billionaire had been betrayed, but he had not been broken, and that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. What an incredible journey. If this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional true life stories. Comment below and tell us what lesson you learned from Damien's story. Would you have had the strength to stay silent and plan like he did, Or would you have confronted them immediately? Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message about betrayal, resilience, and justice. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't immediate confrontation, but patient, strategic victory. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I'll see you in the next story.